I came home early that day, a rare break from the construction site where I'd spent the last 20 years building other people's dreams. The house was supposed to be empty. Instead, I heard voices. A woman's laugh, Erica's, bright and careless, followed by the smooth baritone of a man I didn't recognize. My keys froze in the lock. The door was unlocked. I stepped inside, the scent of fresh paint and lemon cleaner hitting me first. Then I saw them, a real estate agent in a navy blazer, clipboard in hand, gesturing toward the kitchen. And Erica, my wife of 23 years, standing beside a man in a tailored suit, her fingers brushing his arm as she pointed out the charming bay window. My heart started a heavy, rhythmic thud against my ribs, a drumbeat of unease. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments section where you are listening from. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm 54 years old. I've always believed in taking care of my family. At 54, after building a successful career in construction in Phoenix, I made sure Erica and our home were everything they needed. We bought the house together in 2005, a nice two-story in Mesa with a desert view and a backyard big enough for the kids when we had them. But we never did have kids. Erica said she wanted to focus on her career first, then her gallery, and by the time we both slowed down, it felt too late. Still, I gave her everything I could: stability, security, a life without want. The deed was in my name alone, but I never thought twice about it. Erica handled the bills, the groceries, the day-to-day chaos of keeping a household running. She was good at it, in her way. Or at least, she used to be. Over the years, I became her provider, her banker, her problem solver. I remember when the water heater broke, and she called me at 2 a.m., voice shaking. I drove 20 minutes from work, fixed it before dawn, and never asked for thanks. She smiled at me then, a real smile, the kind that made me feel like I was enough. But those moments grew rarer. By the time we hit our 25th anniversary, Erica's gratitude had turned into entitlement. "You don't even ask me anything anymore," she'd say, her tone sharp, as if I'd wronged her by not needing her input. But the truth was, she rarely included me in her decisions. She'd redecorate the living room without telling me, drain our joint account to buy art for her gallery, even take out a second mortgage once, without a word. I found out when the bank called me to confirm the signature. I needed cash for inventory, she said, like it was no big deal. Like I wasn't the one who'd worked 12-hour days to build that equity. I let it go. What was the point of arguing? We were a team, or so I told myself. Lately, though, things felt off. Erica had taken to working late at the gallery she part-owned, but I'd catch her on her phone in the morning, her voice low and urgent, her back to me. When I entered the room, she'd quickly end the call, a habit she'd never had before. I brushed it off. Women have their secrets, I told myself. Then there were the small changes. She started locking her laptop screen when I walked into the room. She began using my credit card to make online purchases but never mentioned what she bought. Once, I saw her Googling how to transfer property deeds and slammed the laptop shut before she could see my face. She laughed it off. "Just researching for a client," she said, but her eyes darted to the screen. I should have paid attention. Last week, I came home to find her holding a clipboard, sketching something in the living room with a measuring tape draped around her neck. "Planning the new tile for the bathroom," she said, snapping the clipboard shut when I approached. I laughed, calling her a domestic goddess, but that night, driving past our street, I noticed a new for sale sign popping up on Mr. and Mrs. Thompson's lawn. Our block was heating up, or so it seemed. But today was different. I came downstairs after a long day to find Erica in the kitchen, sipping wine like it was noon. The house smelled like rosemary and something else, something sharp, like paint thinner. She looked up, guilty, as I entered. "You're early," she said, setting her glass down too quickly. "Surprise me," I replied, dropping my keys on the counter. My eyes caught the envelope tucked beside the toaster. It was addressed to Erica Hayes with a return address from a realty company. My name wasn't on it. I picked it up, and she lunged forward. "Robert, don't," she hissed, but it was too late. I flipped it over. The seal was broken. Inside was a listing agreement, dated 2 weeks prior. My stomach dropped. "Erica," I said, my voice flat. What is this? She grabbed the envelope from my hands. It's not what it looks like. Is this why you've been acting strange? I demanded, but she turned away, her shoulders slumped. Robert, please. I reached for my phone, but she snatched it from my pocket. You don't understand. Don't I? I stepped closer, my blood boiling. You've been selling our house behind my back. Without even telling me. She finally looked at me, her eyes glistening. I wanted a fresh start. For us. For us. I barked. You think I'd agree to sell our home? Our home, Erica. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. I found someone, she whispered. Someone who understands me. We're going to move to Sedona. Start over. The room spun. All those years of me providing, sacrificing, and this was how she repaid me. With betrayal. I grabbed my keys. Get out. Now. She hesitated, but I pointed to the door. Leave. Take your things. But this house isn't yours to sell. She froze, her face pale. Robert, please. I'm not your puppet anymore, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You want to play games? Fine. But remember this, I built this life. And I can unbuild it too. She stared at me, stunned, as I marched to my office. My hands trembled as I pulled up the property records on my computer. The deed. It was right there, in my name alone. As Erica gathered her belongings, I sat back, my mind racing. I'd been a fool. But I wasn't going to let her destroy everything we'd built. Not anymore. And as the front door slammed behind her, I felt a cold, calm resolve settle in my chest. This was only the beginning. The silence that descended after Erica left was thick and suffocating. The air in the kitchen felt stale, heavy with unspoken accusations and the lingering scent of her perfume, a scent that suddenly felt like a cruel mockery. I leaned against the counter, the cool granite a stark contrast to the heat rising in my chest. My hands, which had been shaking moments before, now felt strangely numb. Disbelief warred with a searing anger, a bitter cocktail that left a metallic taste in my mouth. It wasn't just the betrayal itself, though that cut deep, a raw wound to the core of my trust. It was the audacity, the sheer gall of her thinking she could orchestrate this complete dismantling of our life, without a single conversation. 27 years. 27 years of shared meals, quiet evenings, and the unspoken understanding that we were a unit. And she had treated it all like a disposable commodity. I walked over to the living room, my gaze sweeping over the familiar furniture, the photographs on the mantelpiece, snapshots of a life we had shared, a life she was so carelessly discarding. The framed picture of us on our wedding day felt particularly poignant. Her smile in that photo was radiant, full of a joy that felt like a distant memory. Had it all been a performance? Had the warmth in her eyes, the gentle touches, all been carefully constructed facades? The thought was a cold fist clenching around my heart. I spent the next hour in a daze, pacing the house, replaying the events of the day in my mind. The listing agreement, the Google searches, the secretive phone calls, they all clicked into place with a sickening finality. It wasn't a sudden impulse, it had been a calculated plan, meticulously executed in the shadows. And the worst part was, I had been oblivious. I had trusted her implicitly, blinded by years of affection and a naive belief in our partnership. The initial shock began to give way to a cold, methodical anger. This wasn't just about a house, it was about respect, about dignity, about the fundamental right to be consulted in decisions that impacted our entire lives. She had treated me like an outsider in my own home, a mere appendage to her ambitions. The thought fueled a simmering rage, a desire for retribution that surprised even myself. But anger, I knew, was a volatile emotion. It wouldn't serve me. I needed a plan, a strategy. I needed to be smart, calculated, and above all, legal. Erica might have envisioned a swift and easy escape to Sedona, but she had underestimated me. She had underestimated the quiet strength that had always underpinned my generous nature. I retreated to my home office, a sanctuary of order and logic amidst the emotional turmoil. The room was filled with blueprints, construction manuals, and legal documents, the tangible evidence of a life built on hard work and careful planning. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Arizona property law. Divorce proceedings. The specifics of deed transfers. I devoured information, my fingers flying across the keyboard, a newfound focus sharpening my mind. The first step was the divorce. I had been emotionally reeling, but I knew I had to initiate the legal process immediately. I contacted my lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had handled several of my business disputes over the years. She listened patiently as I recounted the events of the day, her expression growing increasingly grim. "This is a significant situation, Robert," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The fact that the deed is solely in your name gives you a strong position. However, we need to proceed carefully." We discussed the legal ramifications, the potential challenges, and the best course of action. Sarah advised me to file for divorce immediately, citing her wife's actions as grounds for a swift and decisive resolution. She also emphasized the importance of documenting everything: the listing agreement, the Google searches, any communication Erica had had with the real estate agent. "The more evidence we have, Robert, the stronger our case will be," she said. "And the more effectively we can protect your interests." The next few days were a blur of legal paperwork and consultations. I met with Sarah multiple times, providing her with all the information I had gathered. I meticulously documented every instance of Erica's secretive behavior, every suspicious phone call, every unexplained expense. It felt like assembling a puzzle, each piece of evidence revealing a clearer picture of her deception. There were small victories along the way. Sarah managed to obtain a copy of the listing agreement from the real estate agency, confirming the date it was signed, 2 weeks before I discovered Erica's plans. This was a crucial piece of evidence, solidifying the fact that her intentions were premeditated. There were also setbacks. Erica, sensing the shift in my demeanor, became increasingly defensive and evasive. She started questioning my motives, accusing me of being overly suspicious, of not trusting her. Her attempts to paint herself as a victim only hardened my resolve. "You're making this so difficult, Robert," she'd say, her voice laced with a hint of desperation. "I was just trying to make a better life for myself. By betraying our marriage?" I'd retort, my voice tight with controlled anger. "By trying to walk away from everything we've built." The tension in the house was palpable. Every shared glance, every casual touch felt charged with unspoken resentment. The comfortable rhythm of our life had been shattered, replaced by a strained and hostile atmosphere. I knew I had to remain focused on the legal process, to not let Erica's emotional manipulation derail my strategy. I had to stay calm, stay collected, and trust that the law would ultimately be on my side. One evening, while reviewing the property records online, I stumbled upon something that sent a jolt of satisfaction through me. Buried in the digital files was a copy of the original deed, the one we had signed together in 2005. I hadn't looked at it in years. As I scrolled through the document, I noticed a small, almost insignificant notation at the bottom, a clause regarding the transfer of ownership in the event of divorce. It was a standard clause, something we had likely overlooked when we signed the document. But it was there, nonetheless. It stated that in the event of a legal separation or divorce, the property would revert to the original owner, in this case, me. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't just about the house, it was about the principle. It was about ensuring that Erica's betrayal wouldn't go unpunished. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. The plan was taking shape. It wasn't about seeking revenge, it was about justice. It was about making Erica face the consequences of her actions, about ensuring that her attempt to start a new life on my dime would fail spectacularly. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Erica wouldn't go down without a fight. But I was prepared. I had the law on my side, and I had the unwavering resolve to see this through. The shock of her betrayal had hardened me, sharpening my focus and igniting a quiet determination. This wasn't just about losing a house, it was about regaining my sense of self, about asserting my boundaries, about proving that I wouldn't be taken advantage of. And as I looked out the window at the darkening sky, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. The storm had broken, and the clear path to resolution was finally visible. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. The following weeks were a meticulously choreographed dance of legal maneuvers and calculated silence. I became a student of the system, devouring every detail of Arizona's divorce laws, property rights, and financial disclosure requirements. Sarah, my lawyer, became my confidant and strategist, her sharp mind a welcome counterpoint to the emotional turmoil churning within me. "We're building a fortress, Robert," she said one afternoon, her eyes gleaming with a professional satisfaction. "Brick by brick, document by document. Erica's going to find herself boxed in, with no way out but the one we choose." The first move was the divorce petition. I filed it swiftly, citing irreconcilable differences and attaching a meticulously compiled dossier of evidence: the listing agreement, the Google search history, bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals, and even a recorded phone call where Erica, unaware I was listening, discussed her plans with her lover. His name was Daniel, a smooth-talking art dealer who frequented her gallery. The recording, obtained through a legal wiretap Sarah had arranged, was damning. Erica's voice, laced with excitement and a hint of triumph, spoke of a new life in Sedona, of selling the house quickly, and of leaving Robert in the dust. The petition landed like a bombshell. Erica's initial reaction was one of stunned disbelief, followed by a flurry of angry phone calls and accusatory texts. "You're ruining everything," she screamed over the phone one evening, her voice shaking with rage. "I was trying to build a better life for us." "For us?" I repeated, my voice cold and measured. "You were trying to steal from me, Erica. Don't pretend this was about anything other than your own selfish desires." The silence that followed was more eloquent than any words. The legal process moved with glacial slowness, each step a deliberate march towards the inevitable. Erica, realizing the gravity of her situation, hired her own lawyer, a slick, expensive attorney named Charles who specialized in high-profile divorces. He attempted to negotiate, offering settlements that were laughably inadequate, clearly aimed at minimizing Erica's losses. I stood firm, my resolve unshakable. Sarah, a seasoned veteran of these battles, guided me through the negotiations, her advice a steadying force amidst the emotional turmoil. "They're testing your limits, Robert," she said, her voice calm. "Don't let them see you flinch. We have the upper hand, remember that." The discovery process revealed even more damning evidence. Erica had been siphoning funds from our joint accounts for months, funneling them into a secret account under Daniel's name. She had also been selling off valuable pieces from her gallery, pocketing the proceeds. The extent of her deception was staggering, a web of lies and financial manipulation that left me feeling both angry and profoundly sad. As the legal battle raged on, I focused on securing the house. I changed the locks, installed a security system, and informed the real estate agent that any attempts to show the property would be met with legal action. The "for sale" sign that had briefly appeared on our lawn was promptly removed, a symbolic victory that felt oddly satisfying. Erica's desperation became increasingly apparent. She began making public scenes, accusing me of being heartless and vindictive. She tried to turn our mutual friends against me, painting herself as the victim of a cruel and calculating husband. I remained silent, letting the legal process speak for itself. I knew that any public response would only fuel the fire, giving her the attention she craved. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my own life, piece by shattered piece. One afternoon, as I was sorting through old photographs in the attic, I came across a box of mementos from our early years together. Wedding invitations, love letters, souvenirs from our travels, they were all there, reminders of a time when our love felt real, when trust was unquestioned. A wave of sadness washed over me, a bittersweet nostalgia for what could have been. But amidst the pain, a quiet determination solidified. I wouldn't let Erica's betrayal define me. I would rise above it, rebuild my life, and find happiness on my own terms. The turning point came during a particularly heated court hearing. Charles, Erica's lawyer, attempted to argue that she was entitled to a larger share of the marital assets, citing her contributions to the household and her role in building the gallery. Sarah, ever the strategist, countered with a meticulously prepared presentation. She detailed Erica's financial misconduct, her attempts to sell the house without my consent, and the evidence of her affair. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a sharp eye for detail, listened intently, her expression growing increasingly skeptical. When Erica took the stand, her composure cracked under the weight of Sarah's cross-examination. Her answers were evasive, her attempts to justify her actions unconvincing. The judge's gaze remained unwavering, her disappointment palpable. The ruling, when it came, was swift and decisive. The house, being solely in my name, remained mine. Erica was awarded a significantly smaller portion of the marital assets, reflecting her financial misconduct and the premeditated nature of her actions. As the gavel fell, a wave of relief washed over me, mingled with a sense of bittersweet victory. It wasn't about winning, it was about justice, about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Erica, her face pale and her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and despair, stormed out of the courtroom. I watched her go, feeling not triumph, but a profound sense of loss. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was gone, replaced by a stranger driven by greed and self-interest. The following days were a blur of paperwork and finalizations. The divorce was finalized, the property deed secured. I began the slow process of rebuilding, both physically and emotionally. One evening, as I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert sky in hues of orange and purple, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The house, once a symbol of betrayal, now felt like a sanctuary, a testament to my resilience and my ability to rise above adversity. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The scars of Erica's betrayal would take time to heal. But I was no longer the naive man who had been blindsided by her deception. I was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to build a life worthy of the love and respect I deserved. The revelation of Erica's true nature had been painful, but it had also been liberating. It had forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, to reassess my priorities, and to emerge as a stronger, more authentic version of myself. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, I raised a glass of wine in a silent toast to the future. The past was behind me, a chapter closed. The story of Robert Hayes was just beginning, and this time, I would be the author of my own destiny. The weeks that followed the finalization of my divorce settled into a quiet rhythm, a peaceful cadence I hadn't experienced in years. The frantic energy of the legal battle had dissipated, leaving behind a stillness that was both unnerving and deeply comforting. My house, once a battlefield of secrets and lies, had transformed back into what it was always meant to be, a sanctuary. I spent my days tending to the yard, the rhythmic whir of the lawnmower a meditative sound. I rediscovered forgotten hobbies, spending hours in the garage tinkering with old tools, the scent of sawdust a familiar and grounding perfume. The silence in the house was no longer empty, it was filled with potential, with the quiet hum of a life being rebuilt, brick by painstaking brick. The initial wave of bittersweet liberation had subsided, replaced by a steady, calm contentment. I wasn't deluding myself into thinking I was cured, or that the scars of Erica's betrayal had vanished. They were still there, faint lines on the landscape of my heart, but they no longer ached with the same searing pain. They were reminders, not of the love that was lost, but of the strength that had been found. I had emerged from the wreckage of my marriage not broken, but reforged, tempered by fire and forged into something harder, more resilient. My evenings were often spent on the back patio, a glass of whiskey in hand, watching the desert sky bleed from fiery orange to deep indigo. I'd look at the house, its warm lights glowing against the encroaching darkness, and feel a profound sense of ownership, not just of the property, but of the narrative. I had taken the raw materials of my life, materials that had been intended for someone else's dream, and I had built something for myself. It wasn't grand or ostentatious, but it was solid, honest, and entirely mine. The first crack in the facade of Erica's new life appeared not through any action of my own, but through the grapevine of our once shared community. I ran into Linda, an old friend from our book club, at the grocery store. She looked flustered, her eyes darting around as if she were afraid of being overheard. "Robert," she said, her voice a hushed whisper when she finally cornered me by the cereal aisle. "Oh, Robert, I heard about the divorce. I'm so sorry. I always thought you two were solid." "We gave it our best shot, Linda," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. She nodded, biting her lip. "I know. And you were so good to her. So generous." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping even lower. "Listen, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but things aren't going well for Erica." I raised an eyebrow, feigning a polite lack of interest. "Oh. It's Daniel," she confided. "He left her. Right after the divorce was finalized, actually. Can you believe the nerve of that man? He was seen having lunch with some young real estate agent from Scottsdale, a girl young enough to be his daughter. He told Erica it was over, that he couldn't be tied down, that he needed his freedom." A cold knot of satisfaction tightened in my stomach, but I fought to keep my expression impassive. This was exactly the kind of schadenfreude I had told myself to avoid. But hearing the confirmation, hearing the pathetic details of her humiliation, was undeniably gratifying. He drained their joint account, the one she'd been secretly funding, and took off, Linda continued, oblivious to my inner turmoil. Left her with nothing but a mountain of credit card debt and that ridiculous gallery she poured so much of your money into. The bank is calling her constantly. She's a mess, Robert. A complete and utter mess. I offered a sympathetic nod, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. That's terrible to hear, Linda. I hope she gets the help she needs. The lie rolled off my tongue easily. I didn't hope she got help, I hoped she found the clarity to understand the consequences of her choices. I thanked Linda for the information and made my excuses, leaving the store with a strange mix of pity and profound vindication. The first domino had fallen. A week later, I saw the second one tumble with my own eyes. I was driving downtown, running an errand, when I spotted a flash of familiar red hair and a tailored suit walking out of a high-end cafe. It was Daniel. He was laughing, his arms slung around the waist of a petite blonde who looked barely old enough to drink. He looked relaxed, happy, and utterly unburdened by the trail of destruction he'd left in his wake. There was no flicker of recognition, no hint of guilt in his eyes as his gaze swept past my car. He was already moving on, discarding Erica like a worn-out accessory. The sight was jarring, but not as painful as I might have imagined. It was simply the final, undeniable proof that her grand seduction had been nothing more than a transaction, and she was the one who had been sold short. The final, most visceral blow came a month later. I was taking out the trash when I saw it from the end of my driveway, a sleek, black Mercedes-Benz, the same one I had reluctantly leased for Erica when her old car died. It was parked haphazardly in front of a rundown apartment complex 2 blocks over, a place I knew rented by the week. The car's tires were bald, a window was cracked, and a parking boot was clamped firmly to its front wheel. 2 burly tow truck drivers were loading it onto the flatbed, their movements efficient and impersonal. It was a stunningly literal representation of her fall from grace. The symbol of the affluent, Sedona-ready lifestyle she had craved was now being repossessed, piece by piece. I watched, hidden behind the trunk of my own modest sedan, as the driver handed a slip of paper to a woman who stumbled out of the building's main door. It was Erica. She looked pale, her clothes were disheveled, and her face was puffy from crying. She didn't even look in the direction of my house, her gaze fixed on the tow truck as it pulled away with the last vestige of her former life. She was utterly, completely alone. For a moment, a pang of something, pity, perhaps, or a ghost of the man I used to be, tugged at my heartstrings. But it was fleeting. She had made her choices. She had pursued a fantasy, abandoning the reality of the life we had built together, and this was the price. A few days after the car incident, I received an email. The sender was an anonymous Gmail account, but the writing style, with its slightly frantic, overly dramatic tone, was unmistakable. Robert. I know you're angry. I know you hate me. But I need to ask you a huge favor. It's about my grandmother's pearls. You know, the ones she left me. I think I left them in the top drawer of my vanity in the master bathroom. I know you changed the locks, and I understand why, but they are the only thing I have left of her. Could you please just let me come by and get them? I'll be quick, I promise. I'll be there tomorrow at 3 p.m. Erica. I read the email 3 times, a slow, cold anger replacing the last vestiges of any soft emotion. It wasn't a plea for reconciliation. It wasn't an apology. It was a demand, disguised as a request. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, she was demanding access to more of my property. Even in her ruin, she still saw me as nothing more than a custodian for her belongings. My first instinct was to email her back, to write a scathing reply detailing every last transgression, to remind her exactly where she stood. But then I paused. That would be giving her what she wanted, a reaction. It would drag me back into the mud with her. Instead, I forwarded the email to Sarah, my lawyer. Her response came back within the hour. Block the sender. Do not respond. Refer all future communications to my office. She has no legal right to enter the property. If she attempts to do so, call the police immediately. Her words were a bracing splash of cold water, a reminder that the war wasn't truly over until the final signature was on the final document. While the divorce was finalized, the emotional fallout was a lingering skirmish. I blocked the email address and deleted the message, my hand steady. I felt no triumph, only a profound sense of weariness. The final twist wasn't some dramatic courtroom reversal or a public shaming. It was this, a desperate, pathetic email from a stranger begging for scraps from a life she had tried to destroy. The ultimate consequence of her actions was her own irrelevance. She had become a ghost, haunting the edges of a life she no longer had any claim to. That evening, I stood in the master bedroom, the one we had shared. I opened the top drawer of the vanity. Tucked away inside, nestled in the silk lining, was a small, velvet jewelry box. I lifted the lid. Inside, on a bed of faded satin, lay a beautiful strand of pearls. Beside them was a small, folded piece of paper. It was a note, in Erica's handwriting, from years ago. For every year you've made me feel safe. Thank you for everything, my love. E. My breath caught in my throat. It was from our 10th anniversary. I had completely forgotten about it. I stared at the note, at the genuine sentiment captured in ink, and then at the pearls. This was the woman I had loved. This was the woman who had repaid that love with a meticulously planned heist of my life. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of release. I closed the jewelry box, placed it gently back in the drawer, and closed it. I wouldn't throw them away. They were a part of the story, a relic of the good times that had existed alongside the bad. But they would remain here, in this house, a silent testament to a love that was real, but ultimately not strong enough to overcome greed and deceit. I walked out onto the patio one last time that night, the cool desert air a welcome balm. The house was quiet, the lights were dimmed, and the stars above seemed brighter than ever. I had my home. I had my peace. I had my name on the deed, and more importantly, I had my integrity intact. Erica had lost everything she had tried to steal, and in the end, she had been left with only herself. And for the first time in a long, long time, so had I. The game was over. And I had won. Thank you for spending your time with my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or reactions in the comments, I'd love to hear from you.